So with the recent final chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen finally coming out after a bit of delay, I read it and I loved it with all my heart. I think that a lot of people may miss a bunch of key things from this chapter and how it relates to the story to a point where even Kashimo is relevant in this final chapter and how I perceive it. So with that said, I'm not going to drag on the intro long enough. If you enjoy analysis, power scaling, or discussion content around anime in general, subscribe as we're both going to win in the end. And now, let's get into it. So the first half of this chapter isn't really too important. I think there is a point behind it, but it may spend too many pages trying to get that point across. I'm just going to get through it very quickly. So our OG trio continue their mission to find the curse user who's been messing with this couple that they've been hired by. And they mess around a bit with one another before Megumi creates the perfect plan to find this curse user. To make this quick, they execute Megumi's plans while engaging in a bit of shenanigans with one another, and they capture the perpetrator before finding out that they've gotten themselves into a bit of a sticky situation by finding out that the girl is a hostess and the guy that had been stalking her was a guy from her job who had bought her a 1 million yen bag. I'm sure at this point they would have preferred fighting a curse. Anyway, they all figure it out, capturing the guy and putting him in the back of presumably Ichiji's car, and they just go about their day. I'm pretty sure this whole thing is supposed to be a parallel to Gojo and Geto's shenanigans at the beginning of the hidden inventory arc, basically showing that they're getting to enjoy their youth, similar to Gojo and the rest before the events relating to Amanai would take place. Yuji, after talking to Megumi Nobara for a bit, decides to split off from them and talk to the curse user. Yuji tells him to relax because it's not like we're gonna tie you up, put you in a candlelit room, and execute you or anything like that. But the guy is more worried about the fact that he wasn't able to communicate to the girl in a more healthy way, saying that he's well past the age of doing things like this, and he should just talk to her straight up. And this is where we enter one final flashback of Yuji and Gojo, where we finally get to see what they had talked about before Gojo would enter his final battle against Sukuna. Yuji asks Gojo if he could perform switch training with him, but Gojo rejects Yuji, asking him, "Haven't we had enough of Gojo Satoru? I need you to be more forward thinking. I want you to carry on my dream, of course, but you're gonna have to grow more than I did at some point. One of you needs to develop strength different from my own and forget about me." Gojo obviously means this as a concept of strength, and Yuji would go on to say that we can never forget you. You're out of character and are you okay right now? But Gojo responds by saying, "You're such a child." This indicates that he still believes that Yuji has a lot of growing to do. But despite this, as he looks at Yuji, he gains immense confidence. Confidence that he's never had before, and tells him that he's going to be expecting great things from him. You got that? When Yuji would first begin training with Gojo after he'd be brought back to life, he'd say, "I'm weak and couldn't help anyone. I even almost got Fushiguro killed. I can't see them yet. Not the way I am now. I want to become strong. Please teach me how to become the strongest." This sets a foundation for Yuji to eventually want to become the strongest sorcerer as the series would progress. At the very end of it all, he does become the strongest, developing the strength that is completely different from Gojo's. He even has more faith in Yuji's strength than his own. This strength that Yuji has cultivated has allowed him to help others around him. It has allowed him to actually save Megumi this time around instead of endangering him. And by Gojo's measures, Yuji has truly become the strongest, not because of raw strength or prowess as a sorcerer, but from Gojo's perspective, Yuji's empathy and care for others is what allows him to get so far in this ruthless world of sorcery. These two talks parallel one another in a way, because Yuji at the beginning of the story looked up to Gojo's strength, and he still does until the end. But Gojo seems to believe that Yuji has already become the strongest, or at least there's nothing left to teach him because he refuses to do switch training with him, and tells him to forget the concept of Satoru Gojo after Yuji would ask. Gojo in a way deems Yuji as the strongest sorcerer by doing this, and his final words to Yuji fit as a true goodbye to his character, as this confidence he feels tells the audience that he really believes that he made Yuji the strongest sorcerer, one who will even surpass himself. Maybe this is the person who could have saved Getou back then. Interestingly enough, Gojo looking up to the strength that Yuji has cultivated and deeming it the future of sorcery was reinforced by the fact that he alone did not defeat Sukuna, but Yuji would take what he left behind and finish the job for him. Gojo went out giving everybody he loves one last chance to defeat Sukuna themselves, and this effort is actively acknowledged by Yuta, who says that they'd have no chance at defeating Sukuna if Gojo had never did what he did there. It's nice. Working together and relying on others has always been a pretty important thing in Jujutsu Kaisen, and Yuji, funnily enough, has never won a major battle without relying on others in any way possible. Higuruma, you can argue this either way, but Higuruma would specifically stop fighting because Yuji touched his heart. Yuji doing what Gojo has always wanted at the very end is what will allow Jujutsu Society to not only grow, but prosper with great people. It also serves as an amazing end to both Yuji and Gojo's characters. Yuji being able to complete his journey throughout the entire series by becoming someone who can truly empathize and connect with people's hearts, and earning the reward of being able to live on and smile with those around him. There's something I really want to hammer down here about Yuji's story in Jujutsu Kaisen. From the very beginning, he'd be told by his grandfather to help people, and to be surrounded by others when it'd be time to go. Whenever you can, and you may feel lost at times, but don't expect gratitude. Just help them. Don't end up like him, who's dying almost alone. This curse would lead Yuji down into the world of Jujutsu, where he would suffer to a point where he could completely empathize with Megumi about no longer wanting to live in such a miserable world. Yuji's understanding of misery and choosing to allow Megumi to give up if he wanted to is what saved the entire world. Gojo had a belief that something like this would happen. This is why he was so confident in Yuji carrying the future. But further than this, it also makes me believe that Yuji's grandfather did not just curse him with these exact words for the sake of making him be a sorcerer and save lives, but I really do believe that he wanted Yuji to become the person he is today. He wanted Yuji to touch the hearts of the people in his life by cursing him in this way due to asking him to die surrounded by others. As we can see in their conversation before his final words, Wasuke, Yuji's grandfather, would continue to pester Yuji about his parents despite Yuji saying he doesn't really care. Maybe Wasuke didn't have the emotional intelligence that Yuji would foster on his journey, and the curse he placed on Yuji forced him to obtain said emotional intelligence. That of course may have not been the exact intention Wasuke wanted out of his final words, but a curse leads characters from point A to B without care for what's in between. A bit of speculation there, but I thought I'd share anyway. To circle back as to why I believe it also wraps up Gojo's story fairly well, not much needs to be said. It truly displays that Gojo has accomplished every little thing he set out to do since he's lost Getou. He's fostered the future that he's always wanted out of Jujutsu Society. He's gotten rid of the higher-ups, replacing the entire corrupt political system of Jujutsu Society with Kusakabe at the head of the new Shadow School, redefining strength in order to prevent any of his students and those after from ever suffering from the same solitude he once did. And he got to be the only sorcerer in the series to ever die without a single regret, as his final words would consist of him praying that his death was not a dream. I've said this before and I'll say it again, Satoru Gojo is a one-of-a-kind character, and this chapter only reinforced that. He was a man who could do anything he ever wanted, but would dedicate his entire life to those who'd come after him. A true leader, hero, and a character who's the most spoiled I've ever seen out of the Shonen Jump magazine. I also think this will warrant a reread for the story, as it adds more context to chapter 222, where Yuji would appear in front of Gojo after he was all serious and stuff, but instantly light up upon seeing him. Yuji wanting to encourage him was not exactly why he was happy, but it was because this compassion displayed by Yuji was a reminder to him that no matter what happens from here on out, it's gonna be alright. Nanami would once say that sorcerers are shit. You have to force your comrades to accept the notion that they must willingly sacrifice their lives. That's why I quit. More like ran away, I suppose. Jujutsu Society, when ran by the higher-ups, was quite ruthless and would throw away sorcerers left and right as long as they can do what they needed to do, and sorcerers such as Nanami and Getou would have to stomach this. Some would come to inevitably believe that their lives are next to worthless because they're being thrown away for the sake of people who disrespect them or don't even know they exist, these people being the regular humans. I do believe that in the end, This is why Kusakabe replacing the higher-ups as the political head of Jujutsu Society in chapter 269 and Yuji replacing Gojo as the strongest is so important to the end of this story. Kusakabe's character throughout Jujutsu Kaisen has always had one integral thing thrown in the viewer's face over and over again. When push comes to shove, when it's time to protect those around him, he will step up to the plate no matter what. Kusakabe, despite his funny and lazy exterior, is a man's man deep down inside. He feels responsible for all beneath him no matter what. Him becoming the new political head of society, since the Kama and Gojo clans will deteriorate soon, had to happen, and it was very important. Lives will not be thrown away so easily. They will truly be valued when Kusakabe is present. I think this was the importance of Kusakabe versus Sukuna, because it displays that even against an indomitable force of nature, he will still do what he must in order to protect anybody that he can, even if he himself finds it to be both ridiculous and pointless. Sukuna was the ultimate test of Kusakabe's character. Yuji replacing Gojo as the strongest is also important for the many reasons previously stated, but it would allow sorcerers to be more interconnected and rely on one another. There would never be another Getou or Gojo again, one left to the abyss and the other left to permanent isolation. This moment scarred Gojo permanently, but he healed from it, overcame it, and made it his purpose to never let anything so painful happen to anyone else again. And he succeeded, especially if Yuji is to replace him in the Jujutsu world as the pinnacle that everyone should aspire toward. Moving on from this, Yuji and Gojo's talk comes to an end, and Yuji tells the perpetrator that he can come back and join Yuji in his mission. He's taken the time to both understand what he did wrong, and how it can affect those around him, and how he should improve. All that matters is how he moves forward from here on out. This puts a great cap on Yuji's growth as a character. Remember, he's always had a thing for really putting himself down whenever he believes he's messed up, and always felt like he should atone for his actions in the worst ways possible. So to see Yuji impart a more healthy solution to a mistake onto someone else, it's just a nice thing to see. This man's experience with Jujutsu Society will be different from those in the past, and becoming a sorcerer may just save his life, rather than ruin it. Yuji and Megumi have one last chat about Sukuna's last finger, with Megumi asking what Yuji did with it, and Yuji says he threw it away, and Megumi's a bit frustrated by this, but Yuji just says it's gonna be alright, and he looks up one last time, satisfied with it all. Yuji truly deserved this happy ending. I really think people forgot or just didn't understand that he was in a horrible state for most of the series. He did not want to live the entire time, but was being dragged by his curses to continue to do so. So Yuji being happy was all I really wanted out of this final chapter. I personally think that chapters 269 through 271 wrap up things fairly well, while giving us enough information about the political future of Jujutsu Society, side characters, and our main cast of heroes. But that's just my opinion. I also think some things have been left up in the air for potential indirect part 2 though, as Gakuganji basically has Gege possess him and insinuate that the story's over and the main cast deserves their happy ending, so we're not gonna focus on this too much. But the pure barrier Tengen left behind will eventually go down because she's no longer present, and then curses will be able to break out of Tokyo, and what happens from there on out in other parts of the world, we don't know. Part 2 is still possible no matter what people say. But if it is, it's quite clear that Gege wants to leave the current cast behind and let them be happy. Finally moving on from Yuji for good, we enter the curse round. Sukuna and Mahito are the two characters who have the final conversation of the series, the manifestation of human malice and the calamity. The two exchange greetings, and Mahito then asks Sukuna about his true goal all along. He says that you were lying, weren't you? To yourself and everyone else. You weren't living according to your own stature. You wanted revenge. Revenge against those who resented and persecuted that cursed, unwanted little wretch. And Sukuna says, what's the difference? I lived only in the manner that I knew. Wait, no. Actually, I had different paths I could have traversed. Too. But I still couldn't help the path that I chose, spitting out the curses deep within my soul, and I feared this curse would immolate me. He goes on to say, should there be a next time, it'd be nice to go down a different path. And Mahito calls him boring, saying that he's gone soft. And Sukuna responds saying, obviously, I lost after all, leaving Mahito to cry for eternity. The final pages show everyone enjoying themselves, and the story ending on Sukuna's finger within the container was originally in, but this time left open. There's a lot to speak about when it comes to this conversation as well. First, I want to say that Mahito pointing out Sukuna's true intention behind his actions has recontextualized a certain moment for me in this series, when Kashimo would question Sukuna on what has allowed him to obtain such strength. He would specifically question Sukuna as to how he earned his title of the strongest. Did he earn it, or was he simply born with such? And Sukuna would respond by saying, "Who knows? I was born a cursed, unwanted little wretch. That much I can say." Mahito would state that Sukuna wanted revenge against those who saw him as such, and that was how he chose to go on, or in other words, all he knew. It makes his defeat against Yuji fit kind of as well, as Yuji would give Sukuna the opportunity to return to his body every chance he got after attempting to show him what it was like to live an ordinary life and to change his perspective. Mind you, Sukuna outright said this was all worthless to him despite completely understanding Yuji's intentions, and nonetheless, Yuji still tried. He lost to someone who may have loathed him and who was his antithesis, but not someone who treated him as the cursed, unwanted little wretch. To go back a bit, Yuji after defeating Sukuna would acknowledge that Sukuna truly never had a chance in this world due to the way he was born. He states that we were born into this world unconsciously shouldering curses, and what sort of monster you turn into is entirely decided by luck. And I had my gramps. Sukuna, let's try it one more time. Living not by cursing someone, but by existing alongside them. Even if no one else will accept you, I'll live with you. Yuji points out that the clear difference between the two is that he had his grandfather. He's aware that Sukuna has never had anything beside himself during the years that formed his character, and when Sukuna displays the two paths he believes he could have gone down upon reflection, one of those paths display a shrine maiden to the left. And simply put, shrine maiden are never expected to have children because they're supposed to quit when they're married, and it's not expected for unmarried people in Japan to have children, especially back then. If Sukuna happens to be the child of this shrine maiden from centuries in the past, it's enough information for me to make an educated guess about him being this unwanted child. I also believe that this could be his mother due to what Yuji would put him through before claiming that he could defeat him. Sukuna claimed to understand what Yuji was saying to him, and despite this, felt nothing. It doesn't fit his beliefs at the time, but after his failure to defeat Yuji, a normal life like that could be resembled by his mother, because Yuji told Sukuna that his parental figure was what allowed him to live the life that they experienced in the flashback, if you get what I'm saying. But again, whoever this person is to the left is up to interpretation. However, I believe it's his mother. The person to the right seems to be much shorter, and we find out that this is Uruume. When Sukuna claims to head down her path, we see that she's crying. I believe Sukuna chooses her path because it seems as if she's a child similar to what he was. Like Gojo, Sukuna chooses to prevent anything like him from ever being made again, especially since his philosophy was proven wrong. Gege left a lot of this open-ended, but that's just how I see it. I also see it this way because it reinforces what Yuji represents as true strength as well, while having the two pillars of absolute strength and their stories with symbolically stifling any potential recreations of themselves. Then again, Sukuna has always had Uruume with him from the start, so maybe he recruited her for the sake of this revenge against those who saw him as an unwanted child kind of thing going on. We don't really know. I also really appreciate Sukuna admitting that he lost in the end as well. It really shoots up his character for me. It's even vindicating after making a video specifically about why Sukuna should not win at the end of the series, because it would destroy the entire message of the series and the entire purpose of it. So to see him basically agree with this video due to losing to Yuji and his ideals, I couldn't help but crack a smile. Yuji and Sukuna had been in an official battle of ideals starting from chapter 248, where Sukuna is so offended yet confused by the fact that his antithesis, someone who stands against everything he stands for, can potentially rival him and push him as far as he has. He even goes on to claim that shredding Yuji's will and ideals will come before anything else. But Sukuna is no sore loser. No matter how much he hates Yuji's ideals, he's come to accept them as superior. So Sukuna lets go of living according to his own stature. seeing both of his alternative paths as ones that are resembled by the presence of another, showing that Yuji has gotten to him, whether he's ready to admit this or not. As Sukuna turns his back on the embodiment of human malice himself, he's done with it. He's setting his rage aside and heading north to become anew. A parallel to Gojo, who went south, appreciating all of his victories in life and allowing himself to finally rest. A true perfect ending to the two strongest. Mahito's presence in this final scene is also enjoyable. In fact, it's even fitting to help us understand Sukuna's decision at the end even more, as Sukuna's decision to walk away and start anew frustrates the curse who simply sat in place since his defeat and chose not to change whatsoever. The point here is clear. Sukuna, who claimed to be a curse to the bitter end, really isn't. Through his loss, he displays that he's still human. Although he's a truly despicable one through and through, even the worst people are still human. Unlike the cursed Mahito, who cannot change due to being a curse. I appreciate that Sukuna's path and what he'll become is also open-ended because of this point here, because any person can change into anything in terms of what they believe and follow. It doesn't need a clear answer. A lot of people tend to forget that these stories are written from the author's perspective, and they usually have a clear purpose that the author is intending to share to the audience. The conversation ends with Mahito whining like the child curse he is, as he's ironically the one who also proudly stated that Yuji in his battle was a war of ideals. Yet, seeing Sukuna accept his defeat in this war of ideals is something he whines and cries about. Sukuna was able to take his L on the chin and accept Yuji's ideal as the true victor of their battle. Overall, Mahito's presence in this scene not only helps us understand Sukuna's beliefs more, but it also reminds us all what this story is about, and how much Yuji truly struggled throughout the entire story. After this chat, the story concludes with our heroes getting to enjoy their lives, which is really all they and Gojo have been fighting for since the beginning of the story, and we open the door to see Sukuna's finger back where it all started with the case open this time. We simply close the book at this point, and in a metaphysical sense, conceal the finger once more. Shout out my dear friend Theodore for coming up with this amazing interpretation. You can also interpret the finger being left open in different ways, such as Yuji saying that this finger serves to be a protective talisman, so the story ends reminding us of the plot point from the previous chapter of Sukuna's remnants being used to protect the weak, the same people that Sukuna once said had no right to live and should live their existences in pure misery due to being weak. It's a fitting punishment for the King of Curses. To even reinforce this, the box says something along the lines of, against malevolent threats, and then there's sunlight on top of the box to end the series. It's a clear contrast to the beginning of the series, where it's nighttime, the finger wasn't even present, and the finger would always drag curses toward it instead of repel it. The conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen was strong, and it really changed a lot of things for me when it comes to the series, so I can't wait to reread it. What it changed most for me though, was making Yuji and Gojo's battles against Sukuna feel more connected and tightened. For example, Yuji being the only one to truly reach Sukuna, this being something Gojo stated was his intention when fighting Sukuna during his final moments of the series. We see that in this chapter, Gojo really bet on Yuji's brand of strength more than he would ever bet on himself, and it was this brand of strength that overcame Sukuna. And it brings me back to Yuji's domain expansion, because the mudra to the domain expansion is one that is connected to a deity that has not yet achieved Buddha status but is still an enlightened being. This deity was Kshitigarbha, and this specific bodhisattva was referenced in Yuji's mudra as an enlightened being who vows to empty all hells to save the sinners before achieving his own enlightenment in order to become a Buddha. He is also a guardian of children who have passed away early, sometimes before even being born. Of course, this references Jin's original existence, doomed to be eaten by Sukuna as children within their mother's womb. This also references Yuji himself, who ate all of his death-painting womb brothers in order to gain his blood manipulation. Last, and more important, all of the major characters in the Sukuna raid have contributed massively to Yuji landing his domain expansion at this point of the battle. This detail of the arc correlates with Yuji representing Kshitigarbha and his vow of not achieving Buddhahood until all hells are emptied, and he has saved every sinner, and he has 6 envoys under his command to save sinners of 6 different realms. And Sukuna, was this great sinner who had to go through all 6 envoys, each correlating to the 6 realms in order to be saved. So let's go through the envoys first. First is the Yama envoy, Gojo, the honored one. Yama, being the ruler of hell, can be considered to be an honored one of his realm. As Gojo and Sukuna contest one another to earn the title of the strongest, Gojo fits the description of the first envoy. Second was the treasure holding lad. The man who fits this description is Higuruma, as Higuruma literally took Sukuna's treasure, Kamutoke. Third would be the great strength envoy, this one being represented by Maki for obvious reasons. Fourth, great compassionate goddess, this being represented by Yuta, who speaks of love all the time and has a domain expansion that manifests a real-life marriage into the world. Fifth, precious treasure goddess, represented by Kusakabe, this envoy serving to defend the human realm, and with Kusakabe being able to buy time with nothing but the simple domain, a technique that all, even the most helpless of humans, can use to combat demons beyond their abilities. To reinforce this, Kusakabe does not fight at his full strength until he has something to protect. When fighting against Sukuna, who is the great sinner who threatens humanity, Kusakabe accepts that he is briefly the final line of defense before fighting with his heart and soul and completing his task. The sixth and final envoy is the Summoning Heaven envoy, which is represented by Hana in Jacob's Ladder. All of this concludes with the belief, according to the lore, that only once Sukuna goes through these tribulations, Yuji will be able to save even the most damned being of all, which is Sukuna himself, and as we can see at the end of the story, he kinda did. This Buddha domain also circles back to how Yuji surpassed both Sukuna and Gojo through displaying that he is the character who truly represents the Buddha. He is the true honored one at the end of it all. Yuji has always possessed the strength that Gojo and Sukuna did not, and it seems as if this was Gege's intention with the character and the themes he's been pushing throughout the entire story. It's like why Yuki felt wasted to most, but her actions outside of combat are the ones that allowed Yuji to survive the raid many times over through her book, Todo, and Choso. It also makes me ponder on how Sukuna eating his twin led to his own demise in a twisted sense of divine justice, and how much of an impact this singular action has had on the entire world of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's truly interesting. In the end, I like the final chapter. I think the lesson of the ending is quite simple. Be as good as you possibly can to others, no matter how far gone you think they are, and this certainly includes yourself. Also, find people you can truly rely on. I have also come to believe that there won't be a sequel to this story, despite what I've said previously. The story has always been about Yuji and the relative cast, not the entire world. There has always been a clear focus on Yuji and him becoming a person who will die with many people by his side. And at the end of the chapter, he has become that very person. Gege has done what he set out to do and has completely delivered the message of the story. That's at least what I take out of it, but I'm sure after reading the story front to back, I'll have much more to say about it. With that said, thank you guys for enjoying this story with me, and I hope to see you all in future videos. Peace out.